Mass Effect Andromeda is soon upon us, and boy, there is a lot to say. For one, Andromeda is likely the most combat-oriented game of the series yet. In fact, I'd say that BioWare has finally succeeded in moving the game into the action route they've clearly wanted to focus more on in the past as they expanded the original trilogy. With Andromeda, this further makes sense as the game breaks apart the more linear gameplay of the original series in favor of open-world maps. And as such, I wanted to take a look at Andromeda's combat in depth as it so heavily plays into what will be a lot of the minute-to-minute gameplay of this newest title. Having extensively tested the combat on the normal and primarily the Insanity, the hardest difficulty, in addition to a fair amount of multiplayer, here's my thoughts. Oh, and of course, because this will be solely about the combat and RPG build mechanics, you need not worry about spoilers. One of Andromeda's biggest departures in comparison to the previous titles is of course the open world focus. Whereas Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3 were likely one of the biggest offenders of obvious combat arenas with chest height barricades and convenient corridors for enemies to spawn from, Andromeda takes a more mixed approach, with both the familiar cover-filled bases in addition to more natural, open scenarios. In fact, Andromeda's combat design seems to first and foremost focus on putting cover on more of a back burner. The original series saw a steady increase of pace, with Mass Effect 3 being easily the fastest of the trilogy thanks to infinite sprinting, quick vaulting, and improving mechanics such as adding an area of effect heavy melee, making close-up and personal playstyles more rewarding. Mass Effect 3 further tried to deviate from this cover-heavy playstyle in comparison to its predecessors by making health pools partially regenerated instead of fully regenerated, with Shepard's health split in two, a recharging but easily destroyed shield and a more durable but limited supply of 5 small health pips, which incentivized a more active playstyle. Nevertheless, it still primarily ended up as a game in which you were constantly required to sit behind cover and poke away, especially on the higher difficulties. With Andromeda, BioWare has retained most of these mechanics that worked to make the game more active and have struck a very good balance, allowing for that same cover playstyle while finally no longer making it a necessity and promoting ways in which you can mix it up. The biggest way in which Andromeda allows you to go past the boundaries of cover and Mass Effect's former horizontal gameplay is through the introduction of jump jets. Regardless of what abilities you pick or what profile you select, you will always have access to these jump jets from the very first moments of combat with no downside or restrictions. These jump jets allow you to jump significant distances, allowing for a lot of potential vertical gameplay and exploitation of the environment. In addition, they also allow you to quickly dash to any direction, making movement incredibly fast and rewarding well-timed dashes by allowing you to dodge incoming projectiles or create distance from a dangerous melee opponent. And truly, BioWare has gone all out in making this a key element to combat, as these dashes are very tight, involve very few recovery frames, and incur no cooldown or limit, allowing you to dash spam as much as you want, whenever you want. It's a whole new universe. If you intend on sticking to cover and sniping your enemies, these jump jets now allow you to position yourself far more creatively than before. Hell, you can even hover in the air while zooming, creating some beautiful air kill moments. Albeit these are likely to lead to a quick death on the Insanity difficulty against anything with a gun. But that aside, additional unlockable abilities like your own deployable cover further reward this playstyle. Or if like me you're more a fan of the quick, close-up gameplay, then these jump jets are easily your best friend, allowing you to position yourself to quickly set up a flamethrower or shotgun blast, or combining it with the iconic Vanguard charge for even more rapid distance jumping and exploitation. Not to mention abilities such as my new favorite, Backlash, creating a biotic shield which allows you to bounce back bullets at your enemies, breaking away from utilizing cover and poke mechanics in favor of aggressive pressure that still allows you to stay safe. Truly, I can't overstate enough how much of a night and day difference these jump jets make, and if anything, they've squarely put Andromeda as the fastest, most mobile and freeform combat experience in the Mass Effect series yet. Not to mention, there is some room for customization here as well, with the Explorer profile, changing your dashes into cover-ignoring teleports. Granted, I did find the execution of these rather inconsistent and hard to rely on in the heat of battle. Which then ties well into build possibilities. No longer do you select a single class, and instead Andromeda allows you to select which tech, biotic or combat abilities you want to use, and from my experience there are some very different playstyle possibilities indeed. With the aforementioned sniping playstyles or close-up playstyles, but also a more caster-centric playstyle, with a focus on tech or biotic abilities to damage or control the battlefield with. Mass Effect Andromeda is definitely not a standard third-person shooter, although it also allows you to play exactly that if you wish. Sadly, it's not all sunshine though. When it comes to builds, I highly disagree with BioWare's implementation of the profile system and the subsequent limitation of 3 abilities per profile. Profiles, in addition to giving you passive bonuses, also act as one of Andromeda's loadout systems. First of all, there's the regular loadout system of weaponry, which can only be changed at a loadout station or when picking up a new weapon. In Andromeda you can pick between quite a large range of shotguns, sniper rifles, assault rifles, pistols and SMGs, in addition to selecting a melee weapon. Each of these weapons incurs a weight penalty, which directly translates to longer cooldowns on abilities, which you can lower through upgrades, letting you play around with weapon loadouts for your builds too. So far so good, and Andromeda is looking like it handles weaponry loadouts far better than its predecessors. No, where I take issue is with the profile loadout system. Every profile is limited to 3 abilities, but can be saved individually as one of 4 different favorite profiles that you can switch to during combat. In essence, the game hinders the amount of abilities you can store in one profile and drastically lowers the amount of active abilities you can use at once in contrast to its predecessors, while trying to have you switch profiles during combat. And it's the latter part where I think the system falls completely apart. Switching profiles during combat simply feels far too clunky. For one, I think the visual confirmation of switching to a profile isn't dramatic enough. It's difficult to judge what profile you are in simply by the small icon that appears on your shoulder, which can be especially annoying when you are using very similar ability setups to utilize the passive element of profiles. More importantly, every time you switch to a profile, you incur the ability cooldowns, making it impossible to combine abilities during combat efficiently, and this is why I simply don't see the point for many builds. Perhaps giving your character access to 3x4 abilities every time would be too strong, but I don't buy it. This cooldown penalty is frankly far too harsh to make it any useful on higher difficulties, or at the very least makes it unenjoyable to wait for. 3 abilities simply isn't a lot for one profile. Virtually every time I wish the game allowed for at least 4 abilities instead of 3, and even then I think the game would benefit from allowing more at once dramatically. Like previous Mass Effect titles, Andromeda features a priming and detonating combo system that is quite enjoyable and very effective to utilize, but because of this limitation, setting up a build in such a way that you can utilize these primers and detonators to its maximum potential is very limited. In addition, this restriction doesn't play well with the resource limitation they've added to numerous abilities, such as the aforementioned deployable cover, which requires a power cell to deploy every time. Seeing as you have few slots as it is, disincentivizing their use by forcing you to use them sparingly or constantly running back to an ammo crate and switching profiles simply feels at odds with the freedom Andromeda tries to give you. Furthermore, it also appears that you can't exploit these profiles in clever ways by creating a setup profile and a combat profile. The deployable barriers do persist if you switch profiles luckily, but deployable abilities such as a sentry drone blow up every time you switch, making that tactic essentially void. The only playstyle in which I didn't feel like switching profiles was hampering my clearing speed of the enemies was running one sniper profile and one close-up profile, and even then I'm not convinced spreading out ability upgrades to facilitate that specific playstyle is worth it until you get further into the game. Profile switching is simply not efficient in any way, and rarely did I find it enjoyable. However, there is sadly an even bigger damning element to combat that plays into this 3 ability restriction, namely the complete loss of party control. Okay, not completely, you can still order them around to sit in one spot or focus fire enemies down, but whereas the previous titles allowed you to exploit ability loadouts by giving you control over when a party member would use a tech, combat or biotic ability, Andromeda doesn't allow for this mechanic in the slightest. With a game that already limits the amount of abilities you have in such a drastic way, it then would have greatly benefited from party combos that are now completely gone. This priming and detonating system, which is highly enjoyable and rewarding, would have worked much better in a title where you still had full control over party member ability usage, and I simply can't find any good reason for this to be absent, as it takes away a significant tactical element of the game. Ultimately though, I do want to reiterate that I have absolutely loved my time on Insanity with Mass Effect Andromeda so far when it comes down to combat. The dramatic increase in mobility and vertical gameplay has created for so many more creative moments than ever before. The actual build mechanics seem highly competent too and have expanded far beyond what Mass Effect has done in the past. Every ability, of which there are plenty, has significant different upgrades. There are a ton of weapons to research and develop, and the result is that you can truly make something interesting that you enjoy playing. The minute-to-minute gameplay is simply great, and this of course also heavily ties into the Horde mode multiplayer that I've definitely enjoyed my time with as well. Although I strongly disagree with the 3 ability limit and don't see profile switching as efficient or enjoyable, the profile passives themselves have interesting build implications. I will truly miss the tactical element of bossing my party members around, and I worry a little bit about the continued enjoyment of sticking with one build of 3 well-upgraded abilities, but nevertheless I'm confident that when it comes down to combat, Andromeda has absolutely created a far more compelling experience than Mass Effect has ever had. Thank you for watching, my name is Ben Haas, and I'll see you in the next video.